What's up YouTube, this is FJ and I just want to make this video to give you guys some of my insight on why I think long distance relationships fail or how they fail. Now this is based on my past experiences. I've had a number of long distance relationships, whether it be attempting to start a relationship while already far apart and actually not even met. With the whole online dating experience, you're able to communicate with people across the world. So I've had a couple of those, not even through the dating apps, even in the past, but even just through social media, whether it be Facebook or YouTube, things like that. I've also had relationships where you meet in person and then things go really well in the beginning, but then you're stuck in the situation where you're going to have to pursue a long distance relationship. Now, the reason why most long distance relationships fail is because they start off with high intensity, high excitement, and then immediately you pull the two parties apart. So let's take, for example, the first scenario where you haven't even met and you start communicating with each other online. You never establish that sense of intimacy or even that closeness, that physical closeness, which actually is a huge part of a relationship. For most relationships, it's actually very integral and very important for people. So right off the bat, you don't have as much foundation to build that relationship on because you're already starting from far apart. It relies a lot more heavily on open and honest communication and really strong conflict resolution. At the core of that is the trust factor. How can you trust someone you've never met? From the get-go, you're setting the bar really high, and it ends up being much more challenging in the future. The other scenario of that is when you meet in person. Let's say if you're on vacation somewhere, or if just so happens that you have a very short-term meeting in person to establish the beginning of the relationship, and then within a short amount of time you fall for each other, or you start to really gain interest in each other, and then you're pulled apart because of whatever circumstance, whether it be work or you live in another country or whatever it is, and now all of a sudden it's a long-distance relationship. The problem with that scenario, again, is the fact that right in the beginning, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of interest, and a lot of intrigue in those two parties. It's a very substantial emotional high. As soon as you pull them apart, you go from a very high to a very low. And again, it relies so heavily on effective communication, open communication, and trust. But once you reach conflict, sometimes words aren't enough. You just want to be close to that person, maybe even sit in silence, physical touch, a sense of trust and acceptance with each other when you're together, and that makes things better. But being long distance, you don't have that. The only way I really feel a long distance relationship will survive is if both parties spend a substantial amount of time in the beginning. Substantial can be subjective. It could be, let's say, 2 to 3 months or something, or even several months. I just don't think 2 to 4 weeks is substantial enough. You kind of need to lay out a solid foundation in the relationship before you want to test yourselves with distance. You're getting rid of a very critical part of a relationship, which is physical closeness and intimacy, and you're pulling those two parties apart. You have to rely on their loyalty, their communication, their honesty, or their will to keep pushing to make the relationship survive. Unless you have the solid foundation early in the relationship where you set down your expectations for each other, you're able to communicate effectively with each other, you've been able to grow and learn enough about each other to know how you communicate with each other. Once you've laid that foundation and you know that it's solid, that is the only way I think a long distance relationship can survive. I guess I've had one experience like that a long time ago in university. We were together for 2 months, and then she had to go away for a work term in another province. That was like a 4-month separation, but 2 months into it, we visited each other anyways. But still, in that case, we had those first 2 months to really solidify the relationship before the test of long distance. And of course, patience, communication, understanding, all those things become way more critical so the relationship survives. But if you do not have that early foundation, if you don't have that time to get to know each other deeply enough to know each other and to know how both of you communicate, the likelihood of surviving a long distance is just very, very low. Actually, guys, I wanted to mention one more scenario to you that I think can happen to a lot of long distance relationships. So let's take, for example, the scenario where you have that brief duration of time where you try and build a relationship really quickly, and then you are separated with long distance without any real foundation. So you end up far away, and since it's early in the relationship, you two invest a lot of time in each other with communication. You sacrifice a lot of your own time to make time for the other. You give up on sleep, easily distracted at work. Every opportunity that you have to communicate with each other, you take it. Both of you are at this high in the beginning of the relationship. So in time, if any one of those two starts to waver, or maybe they get over their honeymoon phase or their initial high, they start to normalize who their normal routine before the relationship. You have this level of attention towards each other. And then if one of them starts to come back down, what could happen, rather than the other one who's still high up understanding what's going on, they're going to notice. You were both at this consistent level of high in the beginning of the relationship, but this one starts to come down. This person's going to notice that this is coming down and probably inquire why. They're going to ask, how come we don't really talk as much anymore? Or we used to make time for each other, let's say talking after work, or talking before we go to sleep, or talking right when we wake up. You used to do this, but now we don't do that anymore. So this person is not so much becoming overbearing or expecting too much of their partner, which is fairly so. This is what this person was used to right from the beginning. There's a deviation and there's a change in communication. What that ends up doing is it pushes this person even further away, because then they don't feel like they're allowed to be normal, be themselves, and then it comes crashing down. If you're in this long distance relationship, there's no foundation built, trust, communication, and all that. It's all pretty much up in the air in the beginning because you're so high up with emotions and infatuation. As soon as it starts to waver, likely it's doomed. It's doomed to just fail at that point. Unless you two have that established method of conflict resolution where you guys understand each other and understand where that dip is coming from, so that either you come to a compromise, you reach a point where you're able to really explain what's going on to each other and still not lose that trust in each other. So you're not constantly nagging back and forth about why things are not what you want them to be, why aren't they ideal. Unless you have that established prior with that foundation, yeah, it all comes tumbling down. It's inconsistent because right at the beginning of your relationship, you're so into each other. It comes to a point there where like who comes down first from their honeymoon phase. If you both stay at your honeymoon phase the entire time that you're separated, that should work because you both still put that same amount of attention towards each other and commitment towards each other. You deal with the conflict. Hopefully when you guys see each other again in person, you have that physical closeness. That's another thing too. Once you come down from that high, this little thing, and then you get to an argument and that starts to just really crumble, there's a lot of things that physical closeness and intimacy can just fix on its own. At any point in time, you could just get up, go to that person, see them face to face, and deal with it face to face. Even just being there for them, physical presence without even saying much, that's actually worth quite a lot. You don't have that in long distance, so you can't even rely on that as like your last resort to fix something. So I just wanted to add that. Tell me what you guys think. This is just coming from my personal experiences. I'd love to hear what you guys have gone through, if you have any kind of similar stories, or if you have successful long distance stories. You know, I've met other couples, maybe exchange students, or they came from different countries still to like work in a particular area. They build interest towards each other, they start falling for each other, but still they had that substantial amount of time, 2, 3, 4 months together before they had to go back to their respective countries. And they're still going strong, you know, 2, 3 years into the relationship, they're still going. So congratulations to them, and I really have high hopes for them. I know it's still possible. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it does make a huge difference that you have that first substantial amount of time to put towards each other to set the foundation for your relationship. If you don't have that, let's say you go on a holiday or vacation for a week or two and you meet someone in that sense, and then you're pulled apart for that relationship. You are at such an emotional high, you get pulled apart. All you're left with for the next time you guys are going to see each other is just that anticipation. And then you guys get to see each other for that second time. Again, it's another emotional high. It's volatile. It's not really setting a solid foundation for the relationship. You're just building upon something that has a very shaky foundation. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Hopefully you guys liked this video. If you did, please click like and subscribe. And thanks so much for watching, guys. Peace out.